I'm walking down the street.
I do want to say to Doni and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
Put my hat up.
I'm South Carolina, so I just...
gotta be you.
Got it.
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Moss?
Oh, my heart,
Happy 20th anniversary.
my heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? Johnny.
Gotta be me and dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself. There's a
The doctor lived next door to the janitor to the reverend and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks either. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Doni, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it all the more.
letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you.
First name's Doni, last name's Glover. In it to win it for the long haul, baby. I hope that you are well. All right. So today, boys and girls, I want to talk with you about black newspapers, about black media, about something that I do all day, every day. Not sure why my lighting is so crazy, but if it ain't one thing, it's another. But that's kind of what I want to talk about today. Black journalism, black newspapers. There's nothing like that first sip or two. All right, so on March 16th, 1827, something marvelous happened. And you know, I'm embarrassed to say I never thought about this before this year. Not in these terms. March 16th, 1827, the first black newspaper came about. First black newspaper. Freedom's Journal was the name. Have you ever heard of Freedom's Journal? My man, Kevin Watkins. The first black newspaper came about. Founded by John Russwurm, Dr. Samuel Cornish, and probably a handful of others. And on this, well, in this same year, 1827, what's notable, 1827, keep that year in mind. What's notable is that in New York City, and the paper was founded in New York City, is that slavery ended in New York that very same year. 1827, slavery ended in New York. The black newspaper was born in New York. A lot of people don't know that. Slavery's still going on in the rest of the country, particularly the southern nations. But in New York City, slavery ended in 1827. Not at all to say that blacks did not have to fight in New York. They still had to fight. But freedom was established. Slavery was abolished. And I love New York for that. Baltimore, of course, where we are broadcasting from, is the South, just below the Mason-Dixon line, Philadelphia. And so it started what we call the black press tradition, which still goes on to this day, starting with black newspapers. But because remember, there were There was no radio at the time. There was certainly no television. There were other newspapers to follow. I think I should share probably some of that information with you. One I just learned of yesterday. Now, I knew about Frederick Douglass's The North Star. Frederick Douglass's newspaper was founded in Rochester, New York. And neither one lasted a very long time, but they nonetheless set the stage for a very long tradition. So here's the one I just learned of yesterday. I just didn't know. Philip Alexander Bell's Colored American. The Colored American. This was 1837. Freedom's Journal was 1827. Frederick Douglass's newspaper was 1847, but I just learned of this yesterday. Philip Alexander Bell's Colored American, and this too was in New York City. Colored American was an African-American newspaper published in New York from 1837 to 1842. Samuel Cornish. So Samuel Cornish came back in a different iteration. Philip Alexander Bell, Charles Bennett Ray. When Cornish retired, James McCoon Smith joined as co-editor. Initially published under the name The Weekly Advocate, New York's Colored American was a weekly newspaper of 4 to 6 pages. It circulated in free Black communities in the Northeastern United States. And so when you consider this evolution of the Black newspaper, and then you think of today, we have the Baltimore Afro, for instance, founded in 1892 in the basement of a church, Sharon Baptist Church. You have the St. Louis American. That's around today. Philadelphia Tribune. Please don't forget the Philadelphia Tribune. And please don't forget the Chicago Defender. Now, I'm not saying there aren't Black newspapers in other places, but these are some of the very well-known newspapers. And the fact that they are still around today makes it just all the more compelling and special. But let me ask you a question. When was the last time you saw a newspaper? Have you seen a newspaper? When's the last time you've seen a newspaper? Black, white, otherwise. Research shows that people don't even get their news from newspapers. Not like they used to. What's the #1 device for getting news today? Besides the television. Mobile devices. And the like. Mobile devices. Mobile devices. These things. iPhones, Androids, tablets, computers are even falling behind. PCs. #1 unit, mobile. So what happens to the newspapers? Well, that's what I've been researching. That's what I was researching yesterday. And that's what I've been researching for the past 3 weeks. I have a project to do in order to get back into grad school. I have a team of people that are working with me to help me to sort things out. But the future of Black news, as we know it, is under threat. And now the target market that we should be looking at is how do these traditional newspapers, these legacy institutions, reach young people? Because if these Black newspapers don't target people who use these black newspapers will be no more. So it's kind of like change we must or die we will. And this goes for every black newspaper that's out there. Now, I got to tell you, it's not an exact, yes, Calvin, the phone. It's not an exact science. There are some newspapers that will exist because the owners are magnificent in terms of getting advertising. Advertising is how these publications stay in business. Yes, Calvin. Yes, Calvin. Yes, Calvin. You're jumping the gun, but yes. So from the mid-90s, with the onset of the internet to today, 2023, there's been a shift from what we were used to this new world where we are today, such that newspapers, the number of newspaper employees have gone down, and the number of digital media employees and digital media businesses have gone up. And it looks like a steady decline for newspapers. While there are some who will survive no matter what, most are following the new line of thinking that comes with what we call digitalization. And so newspaper is old technology. Yes. Yes, Calvin. Yes, Calvin Watkins, you are today's top student. Calvin, for instance, has a media company. Calvin does, among other things, he's a serial entrepreneur, but he likes his own television studios. Matter of fact, our last show on television was produced by Calvin Watkins Jr. And so, don't want to keep saying and so. Where are we today? We used to do newspapers. Now we get our news through mobile devices. Things change with the onset of the end of this whole digital era. Now we're in the post-digital era, 2023, and we're also post-pandemic. Cam, you might as well just come on the show. But the internet and social media changed the game forever. That's what I was trying to say. The internet and social media have changed the game forever. And so news publishers like me, I am not a legacy news, black news outlet. I'm not originally a newspaper. Well, not this business. Not originally a print publication. I'm what you call a digital native. And a digital native can refer to bemorenews.com, an online publication, or digital native can also refer to the end user, you watching this. Yes. You have to have video. I was talking with Professor Baruti Capano up at Morgan State University, and he said 2 days ago this very same thing. You can go, Dietrich Greathouse, how are you? Good morning. We were talking about how in order for Professor Capano to reach his young people today, who are 16 to 24, Capano's my age, 57, 65, baby. Woo-hoo. He cannot teach them in the way that he taught students 20 years ago. He's been at Morgan since the mid-'80s. But Professor Capano noted that in order to reach today's 16 to 24-year-old, you got to have a whole different approach. And I thought about it as he was talking. These babies weren't even born in 96. These babies were born roughly around 2000 or later. And so their sense of history is different. Their sense of racism is different. Their sense of technology is different. You've seen it, I've seen it. Babies born on the web. Babies who know nothing about a newspaper. I don't know if these babies know about eating crabs. Digital media generation. Is that your company, Deidre? Because Deidre sounds familiar. I'm going to put the link in here for both of you if either one of you want to join us and care to pick up on this discussion. At 9:30, we got Mr. Victor Pate coming on the show. So we got about 14 minutes if you care to discuss. There's the link. Oh my God. So long story short, that's what I've been researching as of late, where we're going, how Black newspapers will fare. I have the babies. Oh, the babies, 16 to 24, yes. How will we reach them? How will they learn news? But more importantly, if these Black newspapers don't adapt. Now, I got to tell you, I mentioned the Black newspapers going back to 1827 because they have been the receptacle of our Black history, of our culture. Do you know what the world would be without newspapers? Do you know what newspapers really do for us? Until I started doing this research, I didn't see it like I do now. I see it in a whole different fashion. Newspapers, for instance, hold politicians accountable. So as we transition from newspapers to this world of digital media, will we be holding elected officials accountable like we do? See, when you have a newspaper, the same with radio, the same with television, the free press, the freedom of the speech, these are the foundations of democracy. We live in what they call a democracy, generally speaking. Still, racist is all outdoors, but it's still a democracy. There's some fairness. There's some semblance of recourse if you don't like something. There are courts. There are laws. There are elected officials that we vote for, as opposed to some countries where it's totalitarian. A group of people run everything, or a dictatorship where one strong man typically runs everything. But we live in a democracy, which means the press, a lot of people don't know this, and this is something I've learned in the last few years, well, at least a decade or so ago, we are members of the Fourth Estate. So you got the legislative, the administrative, and judicial branches. But there's also the Fourth Estate. The Fourth Estate is the press. And being a Black press person, yes, I'm all in when it comes to us. So yes, I go to the White House, I go to Annapolis, I go to City Hall, been to DC City Hall, been to City Hall in Rochester, New York, been to City Hall in Brooklyn, New York. We did a Black Wall Street there, doing a Black Wall Street in Harlem tomorrow. But it is important that the press is around to hold elected officials accountable, and it's a critical part of having a democracy. You can say something, and the bar is pretty high if you're wrong. If you're talking about public officials, the bar is very high, very, 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 very high. You can even be wrong. But you have the right in this country to G-check your elected officials, local, state, federal, with the press. And that's why it is so important. Now, I'm not talking about me as a news publisher. I'm talking about the non-news publisher, the everyday person. What the newspaper provides for you is the opportunity to have an opinion and have your opinion put out there, right or wrong. That's your opinion. Now, you can't go after non-public people, but public officials, you can say whatever you want. Or like radio personality, that's a public figure. Me, public figure, come at me if you want. We have a problem listening to my broadcast and try to swing on me. But you get my drift. And so I know they're doing a celebration coming up, and this is slightly different. Something's coming up in honor of Dorothy Brunson. I think Deborah Keller from the Greater Baltimore Chamber will be one of the honorees. Dorothy Brunson, for those who may not know, started a radio station here in Baltimore, WEBB. People call it James Brown Station. I might be getting my details a little jumbled, but she owned WEBB right up in Walbrook Junction. And it was so significant when it came about for a Black woman to have a radio station. She also, I think, had a television station in Philadelphia, maybe something in New York. But the media, my point is, the media is the most powerful entity on earth. It can make the innocent look guilty or the guilty look innocent. And so the Black newspaper was the beginning of all of this. Now you have radio, television, internet, websites, social media, but it all started with the Black press. And I'm a proud member of the Black press. Over the past few days, I've been working on this capstone project for Morgan State University, and it's been a great experience. Thank you, security guard. So also wanted to share with you that in order to keep the Black press alive, it is up to people like you. So your comments or when you share this on social media, that's where we are today. Back in the day, you write a newspaper, you read it, set it down, somebody say, oh, can I read this? And they pick it up. And that's how the news was spread. Then came the internet, MySpace, AOL, you have mail. And now we're at a point where you have to have social media. What you laughing at, Calvin? You have to have social media. You have to have Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. I'm brand new to TikTok. I have no idea what these people, I see some really entertaining things on there. And so that can become a question. How will today's media, digital media, how will today's media maintain the tradition, the legacy, the level of character that Black news had going back to 1827? How meaningful it was. Ida B. Wells, they tried to chase that woman all out of her hometown because she was reporting on lynchings. That's what the Black press does. W.E.B. Du Bois, journalist, among his other titles. He came out with The Crisis, the publication for the NAACP. And W.E.B. Du Bois is one of my favorite intellectuals. Got a book of his around here somewhere. But it was a giant. It was giants like this man. Allison Dunnigan, first Black woman, if I'm not mistaken, at the White House. Ethel Payne, first lady of the Black press. Ida B. Wells. They wrote about issues facing the Black community. They wrote about issues that others may have been afraid to. And then here's the interesting thing. After all of that of what I just told you, you got to remember this. 1827, who could read? In the Black community, slavery still going on. For a Black person to know how to read was punishable by death. And so, one other I gotta mention, David Walker's appeal was a document, but it's pretty much lambasting slavery. David Walker's appeal. And he'd walk around, had it printed, and he would give it away to different people wherever he went. David Walker's appeal. These were bold actions in this racist country. Bold actions. But they laid the foundations of the Black press. They addressed our issues like no one else could, would, or should. I'm of the belief that nobody's going to do for you what you can and should do for yourself. I am a victor, not a victim. Everybody's had some things happen to them, but it's where our mindset goes. Woe is me, or thank you, Lord, for another day. That's all I needed you to do was wake me up, because I got the rest of this. And that's what we got to get back to, that self-determination. Marcus Garvey. Now, he had a newspaper, but he comes to mind because Marcus Garvey built the largest organization of Black people in the world. come to America with a Jamaican accent and organize the largest organization of black people in the world, Universal Negro Improvement Association. And so my concern and what I'm writing about, researching, is how these legacy institutions, many of which have died in every community, black, white, Latino, newspapers across the board, across the world, they have been threatened. So how will these legacy institutions survive? Because people aren't buying newspapers like they used to. The delivery and everything else has got to change. The delivery has changed. Some newspapers are sending their newspapers in the mail. And so what does that mean? It means a loss of jobs. It means unemployed people or people who have to learn a new skill. There was a time you needed a photographer. Now, the iPhone has a pretty daggone picture on it. And you can edit it on the spot. Or you can do video and load it instantly to Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok. And again, I'm brand new to TikTok. I wouldn't even know what the heck to put over there. But I better figure it out if I'm going to stay in business and reach these 16 and 24-year-olds, because they're not going to the newspaper. Yes, you still have print publication. Yes, you still have magazines, newspapers. But look, when's the last time you saw Essence magazine? I'll wait. Or any publication for that matter. I mean, I grew up in a household. We had Ebony, Chet. My dad had a business, the funeral home. Black Enterprise was really probably the first magazine I really remember, because that's what my dad had. Black Enterprise, right there on the business, right there by the phone. Black, right there in the office, Black Enterprise. I didn't get it then, but I saw it, but I get it now. Why wouldn't you have Black Enterprise? And let me tell you, in terms of Facebook and social media and the internet, Black Enterprise is, they way up there. They're very, very astute, very much on point, very much on top of the game. But they're not the only game in town. If they were the only game in town, especially for black people, we'd be in a world of trouble, because they can't cover everything. They can't cover what we cover here in Baltimore, bmorenews.com. They can catch the vapors, but nobody has a monopoly over this new world. Everybody's on a ship, and some ships are fast, some ships are slow, some ships won't make it. Then again, some people are going to have a newspaper no matter what, because they're just really good at getting advertising. But newspaper delivery, how new is the news? News is changing instantly. So we're printing, the take on stories. You have to do more of a long-term story. You have to jump into an issue that's going to still be around by the time the paper is on the streets in people's hands. So these are some of the challenges that the world of media is facing. This is what I'm working on right now. Yesterday, I had to run a different show because I was working, and I needed to get this stuff done. I'm going to New York tomorrow for Black Wall Street Harlem. I'm going to be up in New York City. Special thank you to Mr. Wayne Frazier. Woo-hoo! Mr. Wayne Frazier is in the Maryland, Washington Minority Companies Association. They have a huge event coming up on May 12th. Now, if you've never been to Mr. Frazier's event, and Miss Pat Frazier and their team, they have a wonderful event out at the Martin's West. It'll be May 12th, always early morning, so get your rest the night before, because 6 o'clock, 6:30, you need to be headed to breakfast out at Martin's West in Woodlawn. It is the largest minority business event that I know of in the region. There's some others. I understand Afro has a huge event coming up. And while I'm not promoting Martin's West, it is probably the venue where you can have an event for a large number of people. Let's not ever forget Mr. Raymond Haysbert, Nikita Haysbert, the Reginald Haysbert, and the Forum Caterers, and the other Black-owned entities, halls that we have that we ought to be using. I've heard so many wonderful things. I have not yet been there, sadly, just not far from here, Unity Hall on Utah Street. My my old barber, Nate, gave an event around there, and I do look forward to connecting with the owners of Unity Hall. But when you have an event that's so big that you have to get a Martin's West, i.e. the Afro's annual tea, and this is for women, to my understanding, or Wayne Frazier's Maryland, Washington Minority Companies Association annual breakfast. And this is like the 36th, 37th year of the event. And that's huge, huge, a lot of work. But, and I might be stretching that. Tyrone Taborn's event is 37 years. I'm not sure the number on Wayne Frazier's event. But when you have outlets, Tyrone Taborn helps put this show together, help nominate the show for Emmy nomination. Tyrone Taborn, everybody should know his name. He is not only working on the internet and the social media, but this show is in the metaverse. You know, we put those Oculus goggles on and you interact, and that's where we're going. And that will probably be the ending of this paper. Okay, so thank you for listening to me. Oh, here comes young Michael Haney. Owned by DC developers. Is that to say they're not Black owned? Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics. Mr. Victor Pate. I see the fancy backdrop there. Look at you, Mr. Victor Pate. Look at you, Mr. Pate. Mr.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I searched for this particular background. I wanted to create the appropriate ambiance.
Okay. Mr. Victor Pate, we are so grateful. You can leave your mic on. It's just me and you. When we come to Harlem tomorrow, Mr. Victor Pate has always been there to make sure that we celebrate a very meaningful part of the community. Mr. Victor Pate, why don't you take the floor and tell them what we do?
Thank you so much, Doni, and thank you so much for your continuous work in this particular arena. For as long as you've been doing it, you know, when I met you was already doing what you was doing. So thank you for bringing this here, and I look forward to seeing them all. So we're going to be participating in the Joe Mann's Black Wall Street Award ceremony, whereby we will be bestowing honors and recognition on just a few community unsung heroes who are making a positive and conducive contributions to our communities on various platforms. And like I say, you know, this is something that oftentimes, you know, doesn't happen enough, but I definitely say, Brother Doni, definitely continue, thanks to you and your team who put this together and been doing it for, I know, many, many years, even before we met each other. So this is something that I think that is definitely needed. It is appreciated, and I thank you for allowing me to be a part of this event.
Now, Mr. Victor, you have taught me that I have to be mindful of my language. Returning, what is the proper term?
So usually when you refer to people that are incarcerated and or formerly incarcerated, for the incarcerated, you can use terminology like currently incarcerated, right? Under custody, you can use language formerly incarcerated persons or formerly incarcerated individuals or justice impacted individual. And all of these terminology is basically used to bring more humanity back to the human being. Because when you use negative connotations as convict, inmate, things of those, they're very derogatory, and it kind of sort of like puts a preconception in a person's mind about who you or that person may be. So we try to remove that language, and we try to make the languages more restorative and more humane as it relates to an individual.
When you say restorative for the individual?
Restorative of the individual, restorative of a person's recognition as a person that is part of our communities. in the communities when you're referring to people that have been just as impacted or either formerly impacted people. Because when you look at this population, they are still a part of the human population, although they may geographically be located in a particular county, in a jail, or either in a prison. That is still a part of our community, except for the fact that they are separated from the community, but they still are a part of the community.
And this is even more important when one considers the percentage of people incarcerated who are Black in America.
Overrepresented in the carceral system, and that's by design.
Well, what are the numbers like?
I can tell you that in New York State prisons and jails right now, we have over 30,000 people. Nationwide, it's over 2.1 million people that are incarcerated in our prisons and jails, as well as our detention facility. And of course, you know, the percentage of us that is incarcerated is always going to be on the highest scale in regards to the amount of people that's either in physical custody or are either some type of justice supervision.
Why?
Because the laws are designed, number one, not for us but against us. And when you look at the systemic barriers that are built in place since the, as they say, founding fathers allegedly included supposedly a constitution that was supposed to be about justice and fairness for all, they did not look at people of color as a full human being. So of course they didn't feel that they were deserving of full benefits of the system. And as a result of that, that plays out in a multiplicity of platforms systemically. When you look at it all over in terms of, like I say, benefits wise, we are the least amount of recipients that receive the benefits of the system, mostly on each particular platform where it is supposed to be providing services, and that's across the board. Whether it's medical services, we really got an awakening, crude and rude awakening during the height of the pandemic. And I think that this actually opened a lot of people's minds who may have been naive to think that the system was fair and just and equal for all. Come to find out it is not, it has not, and it will not until we take a strong, active hand in making it that way.
Mr. Victor, on any given day, you visit what institutions in New York?
So usually I regularly visit Rikers Island once a month because I'm involved in a voting in jails coalition that is going into Rikers Island once a month to register pre-trial detainees to vote, as well as helping them completing absentee ballots. And starting sometime soon, we'll be actually doing the voter education and registration. But I also have visited our state prisons in my capacity as the co-director, one of the co-directors of the New York Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement. And I've had opportunity to visit a maximum security prison. So between maximum and Rikers Island, which is considered a local jail, I have occasion to visit, both sides of the fence, so to speak.
And one issue that I know is very important to you is ending solitary confinement. Why? Definitely,
and thank you for that. We advocated, the New York Campaign for Alternatives to Isolated Confinement, advocated for 8 years to get a bill passed that's called HALT, H-A-L-T, and it stands for Humane Alternatives to Long-Term Isolated Confinement. And basically that is a bill that will reduce the amount of time that anybody can be held in solitary confinement to a minimum of no more than 15 days, right? And that they have become eligible to have an alternative unit that can deal with any behavioral issues that might have wound them up in solitary confinement. And we did this coalition campaign for 8 years, and we were successful in getting the bill passed in 2021, signed into law. As of April 2022, it officially went into implementation throughout New York State prisons. And like I mentioned, that it created specific guidelines that dictated under what circumstances and how people were to be separated from the general population if it became necessary. And for the most part, the core of this is for it to be more transformative and more restorative for people who have behavioral issue or other issues, and they need to be separated from the general population. But guess what, Donnie? That was actually only the beginning of our fight. So yes, we have been successful in getting the bill passed in 2021, having it implemented in 2022, and we are now currently in 2023, 1 year after the implementation of the HALT bill, and we still fighting to get that bill implemented as it should be. And as a result of that, because there's been a lot of pushback, there's been a lot of some compliance, non-compliance, or interpretation of how that bill says that people should be treated by the Department of Corrections supervision. And we had to now just recently had to introduce a lawsuit to sue the Department of Corrections for them not fully and correctly implementing the HALT bill. So we are now in litigation to force them to act on what is already a law, which they are already compelled to act upon in terms of transforming people being placed in solitary confinement. So now we had to not only do the 8 years just to get the bill passed, now we had to turn around and sue them to make them adhere to what everything in the bill says should be done.
So you not only go to Rikers Island and other institutions visiting and advocating, meeting with people who are currently incarcerated, you also go to the state legislature. Where's the state legislature in New York?
In
Albany?
In Albany, New York, where, all of the laws are discussed and passed by our New York State Assembly and our New York State Legislature. So I also go to Albany on, various different days. And our legislation actually lasts up until June. So we are still now weekly, Brother Donnie, going up to Albany, advocating for criminal justice bills to be passed that should have been passed a couple of years ago. So there's still a few of our brothers and sister campaigns that we are still supporting, even though we got our bill passed, but it's not even just about us. It's about all of us together. So we also support other coalitions and campaigns that are doing criminal justice reform and has reform criminal justice bills pending, hopefully to get past this legislative session. But the biggest thing going on here in New York right now is they're still negotiating to get the budget. We are past our budget time that we're supposed to have had our New York State budget already done. And they still actually are negotiating as we speak right now and have not came to an agreement on what that budget should be, what bills will be included in the budget, what bills will be funded to implement certain things. So right now, there's a lot of things in New York that's being held up because they're still negotiating.
Now, can you take a minute and tell us why you are interested specifically in those people who are in solitary confinement? Do you have a personal experience you care to share?
Yeah, surely. Thank you so much for that question. And I would say, this is a real personal experience because I myself previously had been held in solitary confinement. And just from that personal experience, I can say there are and is collateral.
Oh, dang. Well, we're talking with Mr. Victor Pate. We had a disconnect. He's sharing with us about the world that he deals with. On that note, until he comes back, a shout out in heaven to Brother Ellsworth Bay. Brother Bay, a shout out in heaven to Brother Malik Rahman, both of whom we lost over the past few months. They were both very active in making sure that our community deals with people who are incarcerated, formerly incarcerated, and the like. I'm glad you came back. So I'm going to get me some coffee. I want you to tell them your story.
Yeah. So it is really true and dear to me because of my experience of being incarcerated, not only on Rikers Island, but also in a state prison in New York, one of many that I was in. And as a result of what they say was my possession of contraband and me being held in one of the honor blocks, actually, I was given a ticket. And the ticket is a misbehavior report that is filed by one of the correctional officers for a specific violation of any of the institutional rules. So guess what? I was charged with the excessive amount of possession of sheets. That's correct. Excessive possession in my allotted amount of sheets that I was supposed to have. And as a result, I was given a disciplinary ticket. I was sent to the disciplinary board where they gave me this bogus kangaroo court hearing. And of course, I was found guilty. So along with me not only being found guilty of in possession of an excessive amount of sheets during the course of the conversation and they were having the hearing, they even alluded to the fact that I was intending on amassing this group of sheets or this large number of sheets. I was going to tie the sheets all together, get out of my maximum security cell, shimmy to a 40-foot wall, throw the sheets over the wall, and then escape. So that was the thinking in terms of they interjected that not only did I have the possession of an exorbitant amount of sheets, was about 20 sheets, and that's not a lot. I would need a lot more than to climb over a 40-foot wall for sure. But the fact that I had these sheets, that I was beginning to amass a means and mechanism to help me escape, that was laughable. So anyway, I wound up in solitary confinement. I was sentenced to 90 days, and I can tell you those 90 days have never been forgotten. So the psychological and physiological damages that happened, the deprivation, the isolation, and the lack of human contact is something that nobody should have to experience. I went through a whole range of emotions and feelings and, imagining things, having conversations with people that I knew were not there, having to endure the lights on 24/7. Oftentimes in the winter, the officers would open up the window. In upstate New York, it's cold. So open up the windows in the isolation unit and you got snow coming in your cell. You got one blanket, you know what I'm saying? You may be lucky to have more than one outfit, but these are the type of things that they did to harass you while you were in solitary confinement. So just that experience in itself, Brother Doni, is something that nobody should ever have to endure. Our UN General Assembly, which is known as the Mandela Rule, says that no one should be exposed to any solitary confinement beyond 15 days. And that is in the UN resolution, which is now known as the Mandela Rule for anybody that is interested in looking it up. Nobody should be in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that no one should be exposed to any form of torture. Solitary confinement is torture. And this is why it's so true and dear to my heart.
Internationally, America incarcerates the highest percentage of people on earth. We incarcerate at a higher rate than does China. We have almost as many inmates or incarcerated individuals as a nation with 1.4 billion people. England incarcerates the second largest number of Black people. Just mass incarceration. And so when we get to come to New York, Mr. Victor, like I know, that we want to celebrate people who are working to make things better for our brothers and sisters when they return.
And I think that we all have a duty to contribute to the betterment and improvement of our communities to the best of our abilities. I think that each and every one of us have a responsibility to our ancestors that even did the work that they did to lay the platform to make it feasible for you and me, Brother Doni, to be where we are today. So upon whose shoulders we stand, I think that we owe, an obligation to our ancestors. We owe an obligation to ourselves, and we definitely owe an obligation to our next generation to make sure that the world we leave for them and the world that they began to forge will be a lot better than the world that we currently live in.
Mr. Victor, my favorite honoree thus far was the brother who built the library on Rikers Island. I will never, ever forget that dude, man, because he was a rather unassuming person, but he was a reminder. He is a reminder. He is perpetually a reminder in my mind that one person can make a difference. I heard it said like, if you think one person can't make a difference, try spending the night with a mosquito.
Now that's a good one, buddy. That's a good one.
Tell us about tomorrow's honorees.
So, well, tomorrow's honorees are a small group of people that I have worked with, have met in the advocacy arena. They are doing some excellent work in our.
Oh, did we lose him? We lost him again. So tomorrow's honorees include, I'll just read you the names: Wayne Smith, Aaron Hoffman, Dwayne Chan, Shu, and then Mr. Victor's honorees include Lynette Cookie Williams, Ruth McDaniels, Neil Berry, Brenda Ricketts, and Phil Gates.
Oh, yeah. So you already said the names, and I'm sorry about that there, technical difficulties, as they say. But listen, you said the names, and these are people that I've worked with, people that I feel are worthy of being recognized and doing the work that they do. And I think that this is something that is ongoing, should be ongoing, and like I say, unsung heroes. And you'd be surprised at people that's doing the work on so many different platforms, humbly, that not go unrecognized and unnamed. So this is just a few of the people that I do work with in different platforms, Brother Donnie. So thank you. I can't say that enough for what you do to even make this platform possible.
Well, we better thank Odessa Hopkins, because I wouldn't have met you if it weren't for Odessa. I mean, Odessa has been your sister for since you grew up together, and when I met her, she became my sister. And I remember that one we did down at the yoga studio where her brother had just returned, and he reconnected with his wife, and they had been separated for decades, but she hadn't gone anywhere. She had waited. Yeah, this black woman stayed there waiting for a black man for decades.
43 years.
These sisters ain't waiting 43 seconds, brother. They done unfriended you, blocked you.
All of that. Blocked your mail and everything else, right?
43 years. I tell you what else stands out. The brother, this was a couple of Black Wall Street Harlems ago, who built a company, and he hired as many as a couple hundred people. So, folks, we're talking with Mr. Victor Pate. He's a big brother to me. He is an advocate to many. He is an angel. He looks out for those who are seemingly forgotten. And so if you are behind the walls, just know that there's always somebody. So, Mr. Vic, I know you have some challenges. Any final things you want to say before we close out today's show?
Yeah, so just want to mention one more thing. A partial success here in New York I've neglected to mention. Just recently, there has been a settlement, not a settlement, but there's been a penalty has been imposed upon New York City Department of Correction in the amount of $53 million that will be shared with over 4,400 incarcerated and previously incarcerated individuals who were held on Rikers Island illegally in solitary confinement since 2018 up until 2021. This is a settlement that just happened this week. That just goes to show you how important it is for us to continue to shed light on the treatment, more importantly, of people being placed in solitary confinement. So that's, kind of sort of like the recent success. And of course, any type of compensatory damages and amount of money does not repair the harm and the damage that it does, but it does help. And I think that we just need to be paying attention to what's going on around us and remember that the people that are in our prisons and jail, or our community members, or our relatives, our brothers, our sisters, and will one day, hopefully, God willing, come home and be a productive person in society. But in order for that to happen, that mechanism for restorativeness, second chances, and for people to become better than they were before they went. And we have to have those mechanisms in place. But thank you, Doni, for creating this mechanism to amplify the issues of humanity in our communities, and of course, the work that you do.
And plus, you're the most famous person in the National Action Network that I know.
I don't know about that.
Yes, you are.
You got the big kahuna, founder and president, Mr. Reverend Sharpton himself. We had a good convention this past week from April the 11th to April 12th to the 15th, and I actually hosted another criminal justice panel for the 10th year in a row. So I was kind of proud about that. And of course, we had our good sister, Gwen Levi from Baltimore, as one of the panelists. So she did an excellent job, and we'll be seeing each other again.
Well, her head's just swollen out. You done took her to, she's been in Georgia. She's been in New York. Gwen Levi. I better not say nothing about Miss Gwen.
Right. She be on the case. She follow up, boy. She show up, she follow up, and she do what she do. So that's so much. So listen, I gotta jump off here and get on another call.
Thank you.
Because as always, they texting me and telling me where am I?
Yes, sir.
But I definitely wanted to make sure I came and stopped in for a minute, my brother, and have a pre-conversation with you. And I look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Have a blessed and a safe journey here, and we'll talk on the next opportune platform.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Vic. Much love to you. That's what we do here at blackusa.news, at bemorenews.com. bemorenews.com was established in August 2002. We cover 5 major areas: Black business, public education, returning citizens, affordable housing, universal access to healthcare. blackusa.news came about. It's our pandemic pivot. December 2020, we have since started shows and have hosts in New York, Baltimore, the DC suburbs, Washington, DC, Richmond, Atlanta, Miami, Oakland, LA. I have 2 books. I Am Black Wall Street and Unapologetically Black. Do support us. Get a copy of the book. Check out our website. Sign up for our email newsletter. Sponsor our awards. Special thank you to Mr. Wayne Frazier and also Baltimore City Councilman Dr. John Bullock, as well as another long-term supporter, Ron D. Griffin. My name is Doni Glover. Good morning, world.